How are you all doing? Great. Good morning. Now, I feel the same too, you know. Need some coffee, stayed up a little too late last night. But man, almost a full house on a session on governance. Governance. Incredible. This is just incredible. You know, when I first landed in Orlando, my Uber driver was taking me to the hotel and he was asking me, I was like, what is this big conference from Microsoft all about? And I was like, well, it's about the cloud and, you know, stuff like that. He was like, do you guys show robots? He was a young guy. Do you guys show robots? I was like, I think somebody's going to talk about robots. He's like, what do you work on? I said, well, I work on the cloud too. And I was like, but the cloud is so big. I mean, what do you specifically work on? I said, governance. He was like, you sound boring. So that was the start of my week. But all jokes aside, this is really exciting to see. 9 in the morning, almost a full house. This is just great. So let me introduce myself. My name is Joseph Chan, and I'm the Group Program Manager for the Azure Governance Platform team. Previously, I was the Head of Products for Azure Log Analytics. For those who don't know about Log Analytics, is kind of like a big data solution that handles time series-based non-structured data that's very optimized for collecting things like logs and metrics. And before that, I was the lead program manager for System Center Operations Manager, responsible for core infrastructure. So things like the agents, the management server, the database, the console cache, everything except for the UX, basically all the infra. And before that, I was a developer in the Exchange server team for a couple of years. And so with me today is Liz Kim. Say hi to everyone, Liz. Hello. Liz is a program manager on the governance platform team. Previously, she was with me on the log analytics team as well, doing a lot of the Azure monitoring integration scenario. And before that, she was also on the SCOM team, have a tour of a number of different features. So we were working on log analytics. As if collecting logs is not boring enough, we decided to work on governance. But all jokes aside, we didn't pull the entire team out to start working on this area if it's not because it is one of the most important area that we think is critical to enterprises in their journey to adopt and migrate to the cloud. It is a very, very important and serious area. And so I'm really glad that I have this group of dedicated professionals coming in 9 in the morning to listen to what we got to offer around governance. So the area of governance is actually a part of the overall stack of our overall management capabilities, which includes monitoring, and analytics, recovery services, security, security center, and our host of configuration management capability, which includes update management, automation, and change tracking. And in the area of governance today, we'll be focused on the area of policy. But before we start, what I want to do with you right now is to make sure we get on the same page on defining what is governance. Now, rather than showing you a slide filled with like, I don't know, 1,000 words of text to define policies, governance, actually if you go Google this and look up Wikipedia, that's what you get, like, I don't know, full page of definition on how to like form committees and define processes and define objectives. I'd rather do it by giving you how we actually came to learn about governance and the needs and the business objectives around this area. So starting off, in order to learn properly, we've got to find the right environment. And governance is not for the smaller deployments. In fact, I'm like really glad that we have so many people in the room. It means Azure has a lot of large deployments ready to go. If it's not a large environment, you typically won't have this headache of governance that you need to deal with. So we start off with targeting very, very large Azure deployments. Thankfully, in Microsoft, we have a lot of massive services that are running on Azure, which includes obviously all of our own Azure services and our core services engineering, which is what we formerly called Microsoft IT, also has a very, very big presence in Azure as well. And finally, if you use Windows 10, there are a lot of experiences that are powered on that client that's backed by services running in the cloud. So the Windows team actually runs a lot of subscription on Azure as well. So we have a lot of case studies and environment to study to see how we identify the problem of governance and how to tackle it. And obviously, we're talking to a lot of large external customers as well. Typically, we target enterprises with very large number of subscriptions, with hundreds of app teams that are either onboarded or trying to onboard. Okay. So what did we learn? First off, the aspect of persona is really, really interesting. I'm an old IT pro guy. Serving IT pro has been my job for most of my career. And what we have found is that the persona that we're dealing with in the area of governance is very targeted towards central IT. But for a lot of teams that are handling governance, they no longer call themselves central IT, but rather call themselves core cloud engineering team or central cloud engineering team. Some of them actually call themselves now cloud custodian or cloud asset manager. So there's all kinds of new titles that are popping up. So if you're bored of your title and you're working in the area of governance, feel free to give yourself a new title because everyone else is doing it. But it's really, really central to the overall function of making sure that the entire cloud environment is running smoothly and in a compliant manner. Just to give you a glimpse of kind of like what the latest job description looks like with folks who have the responsibility of cloud governance. Here's an example. I blur out the company name and the company description, but kept the job description. So let me blow that up a little bit. So they're looking for a lead cloud engineer for this financial company. And you can see that a lot of the governance function, which includes, well, the word governance is in there as well, but things like ensuring proper capacity management, making sure that there are proper configuration, central configuration management, and ensuring that cost is also managed. All these are part of the job description of folks that are front and centered in operating large cloud environment today. And the second thing that we learn is that the primary problem that they're dealing with and why their role is becoming so critical in these enterprises is the problem of cloud sprawl. Okay? Basically, app teams are just running to the cloud and setting up subscriptions, setting up environment, creating resources like, just on their own, freely, willily, just creating stuff all over the place. And when I look at this phenomena that is happening right now, it really is really reminiscent of the early 2000s when we're experiencing the virtualization sprawl. Who actually went through that journey? Great. So good news. History is repeating itself. Nothing is sweeter than walking through the journey the second time because you know how to solve the problem. Okay. So yes, cloud sprawl is the primary problem that they're dealing with. And the typical problem is that resources are being created, replace resources with VM. If you think about the early 2000s, those VMs are set up in a way that is not properly configured, non-compliant, and you don't even know why they were set up in the first place. People are just setting them up all over the place, burning money. And so, and it's just happening in the same way in the cloud right now. And so, when we talk to a lot of large customers, their journey begins usually in the following manner. A lot of enterprises are under the pressure to deliver some sort of digital experiences, okay? Either they are getting disrupted by folks like Amazon. Everybody's getting disrupted by Amazon. We should all dislike them. And so, you got to respond, right? This new generation of millennials and kids they don't purchase stuff in the same way, and they don't engage with our companies the same way as in the past. So, we got to have new experiences to cater to the new crowd. And so most enterprises will assign an elite app team, great engineers, bleeding edge, always breathing and just, ticking in all the latest and greatest. And tell them that, like, hey, go tackle, kind of like the front line of experiences that touches the customer. Typically, some kind of rewards app, customer membership app, because those types of things are tightly integral to the customer experience, right? And it's the first thing that you want to do in creating a digital experience. But you're not talking about the supply chain. You're not talking about, the most of the transactional system that you have in enterprise yet, right? Those things still runs on, your own data center, and nobody's touching that. And so they, basically want to build this mobile experience. And so you build a mobile app, and what do you do with the back end? You put it in the cloud, right? So that's how you get into the cloud in the first place. And these guys are great, so they'll come back and report back to the CIO and the leadership team and said that, like, basically, hey, this is awesome. Cloud is awesome, mobile is awesome, agile is awesome, DevOps is awesome. Everybody should just go there now, okay? And so the leadership team was like, yeah, this is great. I think we're ready for the leap, right? So let's get a couple $1 million of monetary commits. Hey, make it like actually 2 digits, like making 15 million or something, right? Let's go to the cloud. Open up the gate wide and let all the team jump on board. And this is what happens, right? Everybody jumps on board. Cloud sprawl happens. Everybody just creating resources. Everybody giving each other high five. There's great adoption, right? People are moving to the cloud. This is just fantastic. And then they started asking questions, right? Well, this is all great. So tell us what you learned. I said, well, what do you mean by what we've learned? We know that there are like, we created 5,000 VMs. Isn't that awesome? I was like, well, yeah, so how are those VMs contributing to the businesses? Which businesses? For what reason, right? And how are they configured? Who is actually dialing home to take data, customer data, and servicing it up to the cloud and to the customer app? How are all those things configured? Are we sure that everything is compliant? And those questions started bubbling up, and nobody has answers, right? So what happens is you're like, well, we're going to put the cloud on hold, right? And let's do a 9-month, forensic exercise of going through who did what, how much they spent, and how did they get things configured and so forth. And that's typically how the problem of governance started bubbling up, okay? If you're in that phase of adoption within the enterprise, then you probably know what I'm talking about. If not, good for you, because now you're prepared after this session, okay? So what do people want in terms of solution in dealing with cloud sprawl? Do we just want to lock everything down and everybody just have to start filling in forms before they can create any resources and so forth, right? No. Even back in the virtualization days, the promise of self-service was really important. But in a lot of actual practices, it fell short, right? Controlling such a large environment is hard. But with the promise of cloud, agility is really one of the key value and benefits that you get from the cloud. And it's not okay to give that up. Not because people are striving that, we want that. That's true too. But because of that digital experience pressure that I was talking about earlier, right? You got no time to respond. You have to be agile now, right? There's no choice. So the number one principle that we got from all the customers and internal environments that we have talked to is that, yes, we need control, but I cannot give up agility, right? But the good news is that the cloud offers this possibility because everything is digitalized within the cloud, and we can offer that full visibility and that full control to you in the cloud now. So to sum up the finding, you have the developers, you have the ops guys trying to do their best to respond to the business demands that you have right now to create digital experiences. Okay. At the same time, you have the pressure to ensure that things are configured in ways that are compliant and that is accountable. What we want to do is to give built-in controls in the hands of central IT custodians of the cloud, right? The ability to get the visibility and as well as the flexibility to control the cloud in a way such that it doesn't impact the agility that is needed by the developers and the operational folks, okay? The way to think about the role of the central IT custodian, which is really the main persona driving governance, is like, how many people play SimCity or know what I'm talking about, SimCity? SimCity? Most people in the room? Yeah, okay, great. When you play SimCity, you don't go in and like, oh, okay, I'm going to start building the building, right? I'm not playing the game of building a high rise, right? I'm not laying the foundation, building the stairs and all of that stuff. You don't do that. In SimCity, what you do is you lay out the roads, you lay out the highways, right? You make sure there's the right structure within the city. And what you do next is you step back, right? And you let the people build the buildings, right? Build the houses and see the city thrive, right? And the role of a central IT custodian is in the same way. You lay out the structure, you lay out the rules, right? In a way such that people can come in and build app in an agile, rapid manner, but without shooting themselves in the foot, right? And you want to see that cloud environment thrive, right? That's your city. Your cloud environment is your city. And so that's what the custodian role is all about. And in order to really make sure that we can give you that agility, when we're building the capabilities around governance, we really centered around the notion that these capabilities has to be built in right into the platform, okay? I came from the management business team, okay? So things like System Center and other services that are running in Azure in the past, you will notice that these things sit out from the outside, right? I manage Windows Server with another set of deployment, or I manage cloud environment from another service. That's not good enough because I have to waste time to catch up with the cloud innovation. Even I can't catch up if I have to do that from the outside, right? So when we design these capabilities, we don't want it to be another set of products that you deploy. We want the experience to be such that when you log into the Azure portal or when you interact through PowerShell with your Azure services, all those governance capabilities is already there, on by default, just always there with you, okay? And with such a design principle, we believe that we can give you that agility because all those capability is always on, and all of the Azure capabilities always have to follow those platform consistency and interfaces that we've laid out in our central architecture. Okay. So let's take a look at the actual capabilities that we think are needed for providing the necessary control in governing your environment. So let's take this mess and move it to the side right now. And what we believe we need to do is that the first thing you need to do is to get visibility around what resources you have, right? Because, well, if you're already in this mess, then you've got to find out what's going on, right? So resource exploration is one area that we're investing in parallel with other capabilities such as policies, okay? But what that would do is allow you to get visibility around your entire Azure tenant environment at scale, right? At the speed that you need to get the visibility around hundreds of thousands of resources very quickly, right? And on top of that, giving you ability to organize and slice and dice things according to different attributes. Things like applications or businesses that the resources belongs to, or the team or organization that they roll up to, okay? A lot of initiative or key, projects within your enterprises are organized around your organizational hierarchy. So that is important. But there are many, many different attributes that we have to handle. So we basically generalize that and call that metadata, okay? For a lot of companies that we've talked to right now that has very large environments, they already have like some sort of metadata system that is they're basically starting to build out. And when we talk to them, basically their answer is, we really don't want to build it. If you can offer it, that would be great. But we're just waiting for someone to build this. But in the meantime, without this, we can't function, right? So a metadata is a really important aspect. Now, for those of you who can read between the lines, what you'll realize is that tags is really what Azure offers as a form of metadata. I always is a little bit hesitant in talking about tags and being our metadata system because there are limitations around tags today, right? And if I say the word tags, it's like, well, that's not good enough yet, right? We understand there are limitations around tags, and it's something that we intend to invest in long term so that it will turn and morph into a true dynamic metadata system that can serve your need in the larger scale, okay? But tags is what you have today. Once you get a view and insight into your overall resource instance environment, it's time to apply some control, apply standard, apply guardrails to your environment, and that's where policy comes in, which is the key topic of this session, okay? One of the byproducts of policy that is really important is compliance, right? When you apply a policy against a resource, what you would get as a result is whether the resource configuration is compliant to that policy or not, okay? For those of you who are using Azure Policy today, you realize that we don't quite have a notion of compliance right now. But with the new preview of the new Azure policy capabilities, that's one of the things that we're going to be offering to you. So compliance is an important set of data that you will need to function as a governance team. Now, policy is great. It's really the last line of defense and I would call it the Uber mechanism to provide structure across your entire environment. But what we also want to do is to invest in capability that would give you a set of blueprints or to allow you to build your own blueprints to proactively produce governed subscriptions, okay? A lot of customers are complaining about the fact that subscription is basically look like a bunch of empty canvases, and it's very difficult for the app team to come in, right? From initial concept to actual deployment, just taking a long time for them to learn, to understand, how to set up that environment so that they can be compliant and basically doing things in an optimal manner. And so this is another capability that we're working on that will help you proactively govern your overall environment and all your subscriptions. So that's Blueprint. Getting a view on spend and cost is really no longer an optional topic, right? The moment you start using the cloud, everything is consumption-based. So understanding how you spend is really important, because one of the benefits of the cloud, one of the key benefits of the cloud is elasticity, right? Giving you that flexibility to grow and expand as you need. But that is a double-edged sword. Having elasticity without control and visibility is a dangerous game too, right? So having cost reporting as a first step is really important. And we have announced at Ignite this week that Cloud In is made available for free for all of you to use, right, on your Azure environment. So if you're not using that yet, go sign up for Cloud In and start using that today. Now, I mentioned that we want our governance capability to be fully built into the platform. We're working on that. Cloud In is a near-term solution that basically we acquired so that we can offer to you immediately to address this problem. We don't want this to be hanging in the air. We don't want you to be paying additional money to solve this problem on your own. We want to address this right now. But we're also working on a more intermediate set of efforts to get this all built inside the Azure platform, the notion of cost management. And finally, once you get visibility, you want to optimize the way you run your resources. So usage optimization is basically the next layer up from cost management. And we believe these 5 areas are the initial set of capabilities that are really needed for cloud governance, okay? Which is policy-based management, cost management, resource visibility, and subscription governance. It is really impossible to get through all of these capabilities in one talk. So I've dedicated a good chunk of this time to give you an overview of governance. It's time to dive right into the topic of policy. And I'm very happy to announce at Ignite this week that we are releasing the new Azure Policy Preview that includes new capability to help you not just audit whether a set of configuration is compliant or not, but also to help you enforce, to track those resources continually, right? And to organize policies in ways such that it's designed to manage large environments. If you haven't done so yet, go sign up for the Policy Limited Preview at azure.com/policy. We're running a limited preview right now, but we're letting people in pretty quickly in the initial stage. So if you sign up fast enough, we can basically approve those, usually within 24 hours, right? And get you onboarded. But as more people sign up, we might be start to limit how many people can get onboarded, so maybe 2 weeks out, that's when we'll basically slow down the approval rate. And so if you want to try this, you gotta sign up quick, okay? So without further ado, I want to give you a view of what policy does in your environment. Liz, which button do I press?
Number 7.
7, okay. All right. So I have this environment set up right now where I have a policy that is enforcing the type of VMs that I can create in a particular subscription, okay? The idea is that this subscription is dedicated to a service that typically does not have very high demand, okay? But it does have cyclical peaks, okay? When demand comes, a lot of requests can come into the app. In order to ensure that the app team design their app in the right way, right, and uses the resources responsibly, We are asking the app team to design the application in a way that scales out really quickly and uses the lowest cost commodity resources in the environment, which is the A-series machines in the environment. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm logged into this subscription, and I'll attempt to create a virtual machines. That is a D-series machine. I'm a new guy in the team, and looks like this got a lot of memory, which is nice. So I'm gonna use that, not my money. Everything looks good. This is loaded with my boss credit card. This is great. Oh, wait a second, what's going on here? So this is where policy kicks in, right? Right before the newbie was about to purchase a D-series machine and just let it sit there and burn money, we stopped him from deploying and indicated to him that, hey, you're violating a particular policy about what sort of virtual machine SKU is allowed. In this case, basic A-series machine is basically enforced, okay? And so the newbie was like, oh, okay, all right, let me take a look at the details of the policy. And you can jump right into the assignment of the policy and see what are the SKUs that are actually specifically allowed, okay? And he can also go and view the definition of the policy if he chooses, and basically read about how the policy was defined, as well as in is JSON format, right? In case you need to troubleshoot anything, okay? If you try to use Azure policy today, this is not available yet unless you sign up for the preview, okay? But once you sign up for a preview, this is going to be light up and made available to you. And so that's the new policy experience from the consumption side, okay? From a developer's point of view. So it gives them clarity as to why they were blocked, but at the same time, you don't need to sit there, right, and block everyone from doing their thing. They can do what they need to do and be instructed to be steered to do the right thing on their own, okay? So let me switch back. My slide deck. Again, sign up on azure.com/policy, okay? We have a limited preview running right now, so you want to sign up quick. I sound like a used car salesman. But, I'm just looking out for you guys. That's why I have this urgency, because I love you all. So again, to sum up, right, the new Azure policy capabilities is designed for environments that are large, vast, scaled out, so that you can do and implement control at scale with ease, okay? And on top of that, we also produce compliance, which we're going to show you a little bit later in the new policy experience on what that looks like. And not just to produce compliance data at the resource level. When you have like 100,000 resources, it's kind of hard to scroll through everything to look at your state of compliance, which some other competitors do. But that other guy that is disrupting all the other retailers, not a great experience. But what we offer is the ability to actually aggregate the state up so that you can see the information, the compliance information at a different organization level and projects, okay? And we're going to illustrate to you how that works in just a moment. But before we start, I want to quickly walk you through some of the basics of policies so that we're on the same page of how this works, in case some of you in here have never seen this before. So this is a definition of a policy, okay? So that looks like there's a lot of words on there, but I want to highlight the key parts to you, which is the if statement and the then statement, okay? That's it. That's policy, is an if-then statement, okay? We can't really take credit for inventing this structure for policy-based management. back in the early days when the telecom guys are managing distributed networks, right? That's when policy-based management systems were invented, and it was an if-then statement back then, and it's an if-then statement now, okay? So it's actually quite simple, okay? But don't let the simplicity in the structure deceive you on its power, okay? This if-then statement allows you to declaratively control your environment in very, very powerful way, okay? A lot of folks that does not have a declarative-based policy management system like this today have to write a lot of scripts, right? Because you can't click fast enough in the portal to manage all this stuff, right? And for very large environment, well, you're going to have a lot of scripts and a lot of for loops. And those for loops takes a long time to loop, okay? And you get timeouts, you get throttles. It's not fun. I almost want to put the logo and icon for policy to be like a for loops sign there and then put a cross around it, because that's really the main value proposition for policy, which is declarative-based management. Oh, by the way, in this case, what we're doing here is that, hey, for every resources that we're going to evaluate on your behalf, right, as those requests come in and as changes comes in, we're going to look at every single one of them and see if they have a tag that contains the key cost center. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is that I want to make sure that every single resource that are being created has the tag cost center in it. Okay, because people are just creating stuff left and right and not labeling it properly. And so when I'm trying to follow up and find out how these resources are used, well, if I don't have an enforcement ability like this, which actually denies the creation of the resource if you don't have the proper tags, well, I'm going to have to go back and ping people, right? Find out, like, well, I don't even know which resources it belongs to, right? So another tag that will be useful is actually business owner. So you need to have that first, okay? So there are a lot of things that you need to enforce and should enforce using policy. Otherwise, you'll be walking down the hall just screaming out loud asking, who got this resource, you know, CMD1254 in this particular subscription, and here's the GUID, right? Or blasting large, this is actually how people do it, like blasting email aliases with like 100 people in it, and like, please reply with your, you know, if you're owner for this list of resources. That's how people do it, right? But policy helps you solve that problem. Now, the policy engine is actually a very powerful set of capabilities, which allows you to handle a lot of different situations via its rich expression. We have logical operators that allow you to string together different conditions to evaluate different parts of a resource. Okay. We can analyze within a value of the resource, right, using different conditional operators like match, contains, like, etc., which gives you the flexibility to really look at complex cases that you need to control. All right. A lot of times when the environment gets large, right, and you're trying to control a particular segment in that tenant area, these expression really comes in handy because you don't want to be blasting that policy all over the place, right? You're really looking at targeted environment to control. So having a rich set of expressions is really important. And lastly, we have the effects, okay? The effects is that you can either deny the creation of a resources. That really helps keep your environment clean and compliant right from the start. But, you know, like stuff will be created, new problem will be generated, right? And you have to then like write new policies, okay? And so that will then get past the gate of denying a particular resource from being created in the first place. So we have audit, which allows you to track which resources are not compliant, okay? And for certain types of fields in there, such as tags or things like location, you can use the append effect to bring the resource back in line into compliance, okay? And we're working on a set of new expressions, which includes audit if not exist, and deploy if not exist, that allows you to do richer correlation of looking at conditions that you're trying to target, as well as a first step of trying to help you remediate complex situation that is not just merely appending another value into a tag, but potentially deploying a whole new set of resource configuration automatically via your policies. Okay, so those things are coming soon. Now, if you want to take a look at the ways in which you will use some of the expression, here's an example. Enforcing naming convention is another key thing that you will likely be doing in governance. So for different subscriptions, you'll want those resources to start with a particular heading. That makes things a lot more easier to query and to look for when you're trying to get visibility into your environment. But only if the resources are created in the right way in the first place. And you know how those devs are. They like to name whatever they like to name it, right? And so in order to help make sure that things are enforced in the right way on the naming convention, you can use expression like placing prefix and suffix to a name like that, right? It's a very simple policy, but very powerful to allow you to make sure that the resources are configured in the right way. This is the policy that I use to make sure that I'm not allowed to create a VM other than the A-series SKUs earlier in the demo, okay? So what I'm doing in here is that I'm looking for every resource that is of type virtual machines, right? So whenever you read the policy, imagine that this statement is applied to every single resource. We're doing the for loop for you, right? So we're looping through all the resources. As they come in, we're evaluating every single resource. Is this a virtual machine? Is this a virtual machine? If it is, right, then what I want to look at is that also, right, all of the following condition, right? Also the condition to look at the SKU name if it contains one of the following, right? If not, right, then deny the creation of that resource. Simple as that. Very powerful, right? Now, this policy is great, but if you want to enforce different SKU across different environments, you're going to have to write a lot of these policies, which is also not fun. So what we also include in the capability of policy is the notion of parameters. Okay. So in this example, I parameterize the type of SKU that is allowed, okay? And so in here, I have converted I've added a parameter, which is an array of values that is allowed, the allowed SKUs that I'll be basically using within the evaluation of the policies, right? And instead of writing basically hard coding the SKUs in there, at the moment when I'm going to apply the policy, I can then input these value as an input parameter to the what we call assignment. Okay, and assignment is an important concept. This is when you take a policy definition and apply it to a specific environment, right? So I want to apply this policy with this set of parameters for this 50 subscriptions. But for the next 100, they may look different, okay? And so rather than keep rewriting different policies, you can then use one generic policies and assign it dynamically in different ways using parameters, right, and different scopes to control your environment. All right, enough talking. So let's go in and take a look at the new Policy Center experience. So I'm going to hand it over to Liz to basically give you that walkthrough.
Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So now that Joe went through what policy can do and the structure of policy, let me actually show you what the policy experience looks like. First of all, when you go through our experience, which is the ak.ms/get policy, policy is a top-level service that you can search to have the user-based experience. So across all your subscription, you're able to see what kind of initiatives and policies you have on your environment. It's not a resource-centric view where you have to click on the specific policy within a subscription and only be able to see that. So over here, I can see the state of my environment, which is that I have 3 non-compliant initiatives. So if you look at it closely, one is that there is a security for express route subscriptions initiative. Initiative it means that there is a collection of policies in there that is trying to achieve a common goal. And so if I drill into the security for express route subscriptions, you can see that I have about a dozen or so policies in there that is all aggregating that non-compliance data for you to easily view from the overview. Now, when Joe and I were talking with some large customers to first figure out what kind of problems they're running into, network security came up again and again, especially for large enterprises that are trying to migrate their on-premise applications onto the cloud. There's sensitive data in there that they do not want to be exposed to the public IP addresses or to any vulnerabilities that may arise by being in the public cloud. So over here, I can see that I have some policies set in place to ensure that my environment is secure. One of the policies that I'm not compliant on is the public IP addresses. Let me drill into it to see what is going on. I have 51 resources that are non-compliant. Looks like the devs just migrated, just uprooted their applications and just start creating VMs, and all these public IP addresses for each of the VMs got created in there. And so you could go work out with your devs on what's going on. You can also change the policy to deny, as Joe illustrated, so that if your VM tries to get created with a public IP addresses, at runtime, we'll just deny it so that you do not have public IP addresses in the first place. Now, if you look at the definition, as Joe has went through, it's just a very simple definition where you're just evaluating whether the type of the resource is public IP address or not, and then you're simply auditing. And just as easily, you could deny the resource as well. The example that I have here is for public IP addresses, but I've also run into customers who's also blocking websites, HD insights, these PaaS services that also have their own IP addresses that may expose to your to backdoor to your express route subscriptions. So from here, let me just drill onto one of the resources that is currently non-compliant on. So from here, I can go directly to view the resource, and you may as well just delete the resource if you would like. I discourage from that in case any applications actually stop running. But also, we lend you to the activity log as well, so that you can see who created the resource, what kind of changes have been happening, as well as the events that policy has been submitting for all the audit events that has been happening. All our logging is on activity log, and so if you would like to see the raw data of your compliance, and you can export that out to log analytics, to storage, and have that at your disposal as well, or just get it through our API. So from this experience, I can see the aggregated view for my initiative on the state of my compliance. Now, before I hand it over back to Joe, let me just quickly show some other initiatives that are here as well. I can see that there's a control cost initiative. You don't want devs to create a expensive D series, for example, resources on your lab test environment, and so you can control the SKUs, for example, for your VMs or storage. I also have an initiative for Azure Security Center. So Azure Security Center re-platformed their policies so that it's taking full dependency onto our platform so that they can take advantage of both runtime capabilities as well as for our compliance evaluation engine as well. Over here, you can see that there's about a dozen policies that the Azure Security Center team have provided. It will also grow over time as they come up with more and more policies to get you secure. One aspect of initiative that I want to touch on is that if you assign the initiative and then add more policy definitions down the road, maybe you decide that, oh, I also want to make sure that my SQL threat detection is turned on. If you add it onto your initiative definition, it will immediately take effect onto your assignment. And so you don't have to go back and forth trying to assign it again and again and again. We understand that initiative is meant to represent the intent and the goal that you're trying to achieve. And so we'll automatically enforce the latest initiative definitions so that you can stay current on your environment. Now let me switch it back to Joe's PowerPoint to walk through the engines.
Thanks, Liz. Actually, one of the policy that Liz has is an audit policy. We highly recommend you to start with an audit policy and not like start doing deny or enforcement type of policy right off the gate. You may believe in the fact that you're doing the right thing, but then you can create tremendous impact across your environment. But if you really want to test an enforcement policy, you can scope it to a narrower scope, like a particular resource group that you have created. So you can just try out things in that smaller scope before you enable it on a larger environment. The policy that Liz created, the no public IP address one, initially we created as a deny policy in our demo environment. So what happened is we have about 15 teams creating the demo environment in the same subscriptions. And once we create a policy, everybody's stuff stopped working, okay? And we were like, great, policy is working. And so we're like, well, we got to answer the agility question, right? So we're like, okay, don't worry. We also got this new capability called exclusion, okay? So if you have a proper justification on why you should not, where you need a public IP address, let us know. And we will exempt your resource group from that policy. And it was like, who made up this rule? It was like, I did. I'm the head of governance. I'm making up the rule. And so you abide by it. But give me a reason, I'll exempt your stuff from it. And so actually Satya Vail sitting down, he was trying to create the environment. Now he only have rights in a particular resource group. He was desperately trying to delete that policy, but he cannot, because the policy obeys the hierarchical structure within your environment. And so the policy is inherited from the top, and he can't do a thing by doing the wrong thing, okay? And so the next question I ask is, why do you need public IP addresses, right? How is your stuff stringed together? And all these guys are trying to create a demo. It's like, we don't know. We're just trying to hit the deadline. Ignite is upon us. I don't know what we're doing. We just need to give me the exemptions. And that is an example of a completely out of control situation. And it's great. When everybody's screaming, it shows that there's a lack of governance. They should be properly and calmly be able to answer you that, well, this part of the service talks to this other part, and this part will then talk to the internet. And so I just need exemption here and here, right? You exempt them, everything is green. Right? That is a calm, proper situation. But we couldn't do that. Everybody's just screaming bloody hell, so we just turn into audit policy. And so everything is red. Okay, so let's walk you through how this scales, okay? So the beauty of the policy engine is that it aligns with the top-down design of how Azure is intended to be, right? Everything that we've done in here is designed to be unified and consistent. And so one of the most important aspects of Azure is the Azure Resource Manager. That is our centralized control plane across all activities that is happening in Azure. Every single services or resource provider must abide and have interface contract with the Resource Manager, okay? And so what we did is that we took the policy engine right inside the Resource Manager so that every single request that comes through must go through the policy engine. There's no way out, okay? And so, again, to sum up, it's declarative, right? Because when you work in this manner, you have the ability to simply declare the statement of what you want to achieve without writing code to loop through all the different conditions, okay? This thing is always on. Any changes that occur, it will catch it. Any new deployment, it will catch it. It also runs on a schedule, okay? So that, we always give you a consistent state of compliance on a time interval as well. And coming soon, we're also working on-demand triggered for you to run evaluation, so that at a press of a button, you can say that I want to evaluate my entire environment across this 100 policies, and we'll basically tell you how your state of compliance is against basically your initiative on demand. Okay, so let's visually walk through how it works. If a user or some automated piece of code is trying to issue a resource deployment request or change request, right? Well, that takes a form of a ARM request or in the form of a template. It has to go through ARM. As it goes through that, it needs to pass through the policy engine. At that time, we'll examine the request and run through all of the policies that you have in place to see if it violates any policies. If it does, and you have a policy that says, I want to deny any request that comes in, right, that violates it, we'll basically drop the request, and it won't materialize into your resource environment, okay? Nothing will happen. Your environment stays clean. If another request comes in, right, and we run through all of the policies, and it turns out okay, that turns into an actual resource, right? Or we actually made a change to an existing resource. Simple as that, right? And the way we designed this scales, because we're not doing it after the fact. We're always watching at the gate, okay? So as changes goes on, we'll in real time make sure that everything happens in the right manner. And that's how your environment gets built up in a compliant manner. Now, if you have a new policy that you put in place and you already have a bunch of resources that exist, we will also perform a schedule-based scanning of those resources to make sure that they're compliant as well. So this is a new policies, right? And we'll basically run that through and tell you whether they're compliant or not. Now, if you have a denied policies that is newly created against a set of existing resource, today we'll tell you whether the resource is violating that policy or not, right, in the form of an audit. We're working on the next step, which is to help you remediate it even after the fact, okay? And so that is one of the features or capability that we have on our roadmap. We also know that you're not going to be applying these policies resource by resource or resource group to resource group, right? So the notion of an organizational hierarchy is really important. So along with policy, we're also about a week away to enable this new notion of what we call a management group, okay? How many of you uses the EA portal today? Great. Okay, so if you use the EA portal, you know that you have departments, you have accounts, right? That is an organizational hierarchy. What we are doing right now with the commerce team is that we're going to be migrating that structure into the Azure portal, okay? So your departments and account is going to turn into tiers of management groups, okay, which will then eventually contain subscription, which will then eventually contain resource group, and then finally your resources, okay? And as the migration from EA portal into Azure portal happens, we'll then free up the hierarchical layer, because in the EA portal today you have 4 layers, right? But that limit is pretty artificial when it comes to management group. So we'll allow you to have maybe like 5 layers of management group or 6 layers of management group if you need, to basically properly organize your resources in ways that reflect your organizational structure or your business structure, okay? And you can target policies or whole initiative at those management groups, okay, which can contain tens or hundreds of subscriptions. And even subscriptions owner cannot violate those policies because it follows that hierarchical inheritance. And so, so that is a very, very powerful concept that will help you to control your environment at scale. So here are some examples of policy. I think I'm going to skip through that and let Liz run through some more real-world examples of policies that we have observed in the actual large environments.
Okay, thank you, Joe. There you go. Okay, now let me go through the authoring experience of the policy. You'll see over here that under authoring, there's two table of content items. One is definitions, and the other is assignments. The structure that Joseph went over is the definition. It defines as to what you're evaluating and what the effect it will be. So think of it like a discount coupon that you have. It says that you can get a certain amount of discount for a particular item. But it doesn't actually take effect until you use the coupon for a particular say, I don't know, a water bottle or a snack or something like that. Until you use the item, it's actually not taking the effect. Same way for definition, it defines as to what configurations you are evaluating and then what effect you would like to take. At the assignment time is when you actually turn it on and you specify what scope you're targeting, say a subscription, management group, resource group, or a particular resource to make sure that the policy is evaluating for that particular environment. So let me first go through the definitions. Now, we do already have built-in definitions provided to you for all your Azure environments. So when you go on here, you don't have to start creating the JSON that you just saw. You'll already see that there are built-in definitions for you to simply assign. And so you'll see over here the type built-in policies that you're seeing over here. There's already quite a few that lets you audit VMs that's not using the managed disk, requires certain tags that you want to have on your environment, restrict the location. So those are already available for you. But let's say that I want to go a little bit more advanced. I have a particular requirement that I have to have that requires a custom policy definition. So an example that I have actually comes from one of our largest enterprise environment, where they are trying to make sure that all the subnets are using the particular network security groups. They want to make sure that the network security groups are used are only accessible through the secured desktop environments that are provided to their users. So they have network security groups that they know is the only ones allowed to the environment. Problem is they have 300 subscriptions, and always addressing after the fact just does not scale. And so they would like to have a deny policy for this particular environment. Now let me just start creating one, deny VNet if specific, and NSGs are not used. I recommend to actually put in the description instead of a test, so that users know if things blow up in your environment, where to go to. Oops. Now you'll see over here, there's a concept of definition location. Oh, don't. Let me go back to 100%.
Control 0.
So let me select our test environment, our demo environment, on to actually create the policy definition, in which case your assignment can be also applied to the same scope or underneath. So in this example, what you're evaluating would be for your virtual networks. So the field that you're evaluating is type of the item. Let's say equals. If you're like me and always lose a bracket here and there, we do have IntelliSense in JSON so that you are aware of any typos or mistakes that you may potentially make. Now, I'm going to leave the brackets here, and then the effect that I'm going to be using for this is audit if not exists. Actually, sorry, I forgot one thing. The type that I'm evaluating is the virtual networks. I'm also going to create another bracket so that there you go. I also evaluate the network, the subnet IDs. So we are running out of time, and so instead of actually creating the policy, I'm going to pull up what I've already created over here. So you can see that there's the JSON already that I've created, where currently it's evaluating for every single virtual network type that's coming in. Also for the subnets of the network security group, that have the specified allowed network security groups. If it meets this condition, then you are denying the resource. Oh, not in specified network security groups, you are denying the resource. And so you can see over here, I'm evaluating on 2 of my conditions, which is that the resource itself is a virtual network, and that the virtual network subnet network security group ID is not one of what's provided. And so by using parameter over here, I'm able to provide the values of the network security groups at the time of assignment and use across different environments. Let me show you a different example that we also have. Another one is an extension. Who here has a VM extension on their environment that is required across everything? Just a few people. Anyone want anti-malware extension on Windows VMs? I highly recommend it. Okay, so one of the examples that I have built in here is for anti-malware extension. For this policy, I'm using an audit if not exist effect. What that means is that for the virtual machine resource that I'm evaluating, if the extension does not exist, then I want it to be audited. So you'll see over here that the publisher that I'm looking at is the Azure Security. Type of the extension that I'm looking at is the IS anti-malware. Similarly, you could use the policy to do the DSC configuration, DSC extension as well. So you could have a policy that's doing a security checking, so it will be part of your security initiative. You could also have for configurations as well. And so for configuration initiative, you may have a policy that requires the DSC extension in there. As Joe has provided, what you may have noticed is that the policy definitions are very similar between the two. So you could just easily use a parameter to just submit your publisher name and type to use across all your extensions that are required. Just put it onto one initiative and spread it out across how many ever subscriptions you would like. Last point that I want to touch on is on our assignment page. When you actually go to assign a policy, again, as Joe has mentioned, we highly recommend that you start with an audit policy. So we already have one built in for you to audit the VMs that are not using managed disk. What you'll see over here is that we have a field called assign by. When you start denying your actual environments, people want to know who the heck created these policies. So back to Joe's example, where you have a VM that was blocked because of the SKUs that are allowed. What you'll see over here is that the policy was assigned by Jeremy Winter, your manager. And so if you would like to go request an exception, you're more than welcome to go and provide explanation and request the exemption for your resource creation to then proceed. Oh, let me get back to you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Liz. Okay, all right. So that pretty much wraps up our demo. You know that demo about the VNet where it needs to be assigned to a particular network security group? There's an actual real example from one of the engineers that is working on a very large service. That poor fellow every week he'll get a report that says, I have a bunch of virtual networks that are non-compliant. So he wrote some scripts that scans the virtual networks. And then basically it becomes non-compliant. His manager asked him, who wrote the script that scans the environment, why it is non-compliant. I was like, well, people keep creating non-compliant, virtual networks. So I was like, well, then go clean it up. I was like, so he wrote the script to monitor, and then he needs to go clean it up, right? Week after week, he's just getting sick and tired of that. And so when we told him that, like, hey, you can have a policies that just proactively do that on your behalf, right? He was just ecstatic. And now his environment is 100% compliant all the time, which is awesome. So we're just really glad that we're adding value to humanity. Want to touch on roadmap really quickly. I don't have the luxury of time to walk you through the whole life cycle that justify why we need the roadmap, so I'm just going to give you the roadmap. So one of the key items that we think is needed on the roadmap that will be coming is this notion of a learning mode. It's a combination of an on-demand testing of the policy, but more importantly is that we give you an environment where you can just create a set of policies and set that, hey, we're in a learning mode right now, so it won't actually report non-compliance in the mainstream of data. So if you need to show your compliance view to report up, right, this won't show up. Think about it like kind of like almost maintenance mode type of thing. But before you basically make the policy ready for prime time. Okay, and so from that learning mode, you can observe what is going on in there and see, kind of like what you need to adjust, who you need to talk to, what type of exception you need. Talking about exemptions, a full exception handling is asked for as a request. Initially, we thought that, well, don't you want some hooks out to some service management or incident management, change management thing that you already use? But time and again, I think we're getting requests that they want that built in. How many of you actually think that we need a full-blown exception handling experience inside the policy experience? Okay, about half of the audience. So I guess we need to do it. Non-compliance remediation, I think I talked about that earlier, right? If it's non-compliant, it already happened, it's too late, well, the resources already created will help you remediate that. Powerful stuff, really potent. So when we're going to roll this out, we're going to make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot because it just goes around and start cleaning things up, right? And obviously the other big areas that we've talked about, everything from resource exploration at scale, subscription governance with Blueprint, which is what you did the survey for, okay? We're trying to get more input and data around how we should do subscription governance, right? Those are coming under the banner of governance. We're also looking into areas of data governance. So if you have actually filled out the survey, we really appreciate it. If any one of you wants to... Oh, actually, this is important. We need to announce the winner. Okay, so the winner of the surveys is Patrick Guros? All right, Patrick. The second winner is James Koenig. James, congratulations. Get caffeinated up. And finally, our last winner is Denise Brandt. Denise Brandt. All right, Denise. Dedicated audience. Stay until the very last. And your reward is to get more hyped up. All right. So I think that wraps up our session. I think there's some mandatory slide. Again, sign up for the limited preview. I'm looking out for you, really. I'm just trying to look out for you, okay? Spots are limited. You want to get on the bus quick. And, if you want to check out the cost session, same room, same time tomorrow. Same room, same time. You just need to get here again tomorrow, same time. You get to hear about cost. Thank you so much.